All right, you guys may have a seat. And man, I just got a few minutes, but I believe that God's going to do something amazing. I have a word for you tonight, and I'm ready to rock. I'm ready to rock. Let's go. Let's do it. We've been in a series called Don't Call It a Comeback, and I think Pastor Rich coming up here and talking about that, the premise of our series, Don't Call It a Comeback, is no matter what our position is on this earth, it's never changed our position in heaven and our status in heaven. That no matter what might go on the earth and what we see with our eyes, what's going on in the spirit is so much different, that we could be rising up spiritually and that our circumstances might be going up and down, but who we are and our position with Christ is continually rising. It's continued to gain. We're continually being elevated in who God is in His kingdom. And when I was thinking about this and closing out the collection of talks, I was thinking about the Bible character Joseph. And if you don't know anything about Joseph, it's his life, if you were to look at it with your eyes, is very up and down. He goes through a lot of circumstances in his life, and he ends up being Pharaoh's right-hand man. And the thing is when he got to that place of being Pharaoh's right-hand man, he was still Joseph. There was nothing about him that was drastically changed or different. His just position changed a little bit. But who he was in Christ, he knew, and he had a solid foundation. And so we're going to read in Genesis chapter 39. But before we get started, I was kind of just reading a little bit before. I want to get a little bit of context into this passage before we read it. And Joseph was actually the youngest sibling. Did anyone here is the youngest sibling? Okay, now raise your hand if you have a younger sibling. If you have a younger sibling, okay? Now I want you to keep your hand raised if that sibling is the favorite child. Okay? I want you to keep your hand raised if that child is the favorite child. And the thing is, I have a younger sibling, and everyone knows if it's the youngest sibling that they're the favorite child. And Joseph, if you see in Genesis chapter 37, he's actually the favorite child, which in my opinion doesn't necessarily help him out a lot. Okay, it kind of is a disadvantage. I remember I had, my little brother, even though he might be the favorite child, but I just feel like it's my duty. I feel like it's almost like an American duty, my God duty, just to kind of put him in his place every once in a while, and I love him a lot. I helped him out. I helped him tie his shoes, ride a bike, and all that stuff. But there was this one time when, I don't even know if this was even a thing, but in my fourth grade mind, I thought that it would make a lot of sense. But essentially, I played this game with him where I had a bat in my hand. It was a wiffle ball bat. Okay, so it's a wiffle ball bat, and in baseball, you don't want your arms to be extended like this because you don't get any power. But what you want to do is you want to keep your hands tight, and you gotta push with your hips. All right, that's where you get all the power from. Okay, and so what I thought is that what would happen is to practice that, you'd have a person in front of you. Yeah. And so we would swing, and then as you would swing, and you got to keep your hands tighter, DJ, keep your hands tighter, and so you just bring the person closer, which of course I'm going to use my brother. Now, I don't know what was going on in his head, but it got to a point where he got so close that we were basically hugging. And I took the bat and I just smashed him in the stomach, which of course, it wasn't intentional, okay? It wasn't intentional, okay? But I will say that once he fell on the ground and was crying, I tried to empathize with him, but it was kind of funny. He's a little bit chubbier. He's kind of still growing, had to get his baby fat still in there. But I hit him, he falls on the ground, and of course, now that's me with my brother, of course, my younger sibling, and some of you have different experiences with siblings. Maybe you fought, maybe you got along, I don't know what that is. But for Joseph, it was a very extreme case. Because his brothers, even though Joseph never really did anything wrong, besides the fact that he felt like he got this dream and told his brothers that, hey, I'm going to lead over you one day, they got really upset, and so they threw him into this pit, and they were going to kill him, but they decided, no, we're not going to kill him. Let's just pretend like he's dead. Let's put him in a pit, and then we'll pretend like we'll have this blood, and we'll bring him back to his dad and say that he was dead, right? And so Joseph's life is essentially like this. He's just he's just himself. He's just Joseph, and he gets all these circumstances that come alongside of him, and then he just ends up in really bad situations. So now he's in a pit. He gets thrown into slavery, and this is where we want to pick up in Genesis chapter 39. Are you ready to go? Yeah. Are you ready to go? Let's do it. So we're going to start in Genesis chapter 39. So it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him. So he had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So he had been taken from the pit to the Ishmaelites. Now someone had purchased him. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. He entrusted him to everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all of that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns and entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you're his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, everyone say day after day. He refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servant was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called to her household servants and said, look, she said to him, this Hebrew has been brought to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard the scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story that the Hebrew slave had that you brought to us came and make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those who held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, who are you? Say, who are you? God, we thank you so much for tonight. We thank you that you are already working and moving in the hearts and the lives of the people that are in this room. God, I pray that the word that you have given to me, God, would resonate in the hearts of everyone in this room just like you gave it to me. God, I pray that people's lives would be changed and transformed by the power of your word. And it's your name we pray. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. Have you ever felt like you were on one of those moments where you feel like you're on top of the world? Now, for me, some people might be little ways, other people big ways. For me, I very much find myself on top of the world in very simple things. For example, I got new jeans. I feel, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I try, and I had been thinking about getting new jeans for a while, and I wanted them to look nice, but not too expensive, I don't want them to look cheap. But I just really liked these jeans, okay? And as soon as I found my Levi's 512s, okay? Mark it down. As soon as I put them on, I looked myself in the mirror and I was like, those are the ones. Those are the pants I have been searching for and have been waiting for. And for me, when I wear these jeans now, this is the second time that I've worn them, I really feel like I'm on top of the world. I might be on top of a stage, elevated just a little bit, but I genuinely feel like I am on top of the world. But there are a lot of things in our life that we might do. It could be something simple as jeans. It could be something big like being in a relationship and that person said yes to you liking them and asking them on a date. It could be you getting an A on a paper. Maybe you bought your first house. But there are certain things that just make you feel like you're on top of the world. And it makes you feel amazing. You haven't really changed it all. Right? Me putting on a new pair of pants doesn't really change me personally. It just makes me feel like I look a little bit better, right? So for Joseph, if you look at his situation, he's gone through a lot, but he's kind of on top of the world. I mean, he's Joseph. He's the head of Potiphar's household. Potiphar was the captain of the guard, which essentially means he's like the head of the secret security for Potiphar. And on top of that, Joseph was just a handsome guy. He was a good-looking guy. So if you could see for Joseph, he might feel like he is on top of the world. And I think that for us, there can be times when we feel like we are on top of the world when we're not. When we feel like we're on top of the world, and sometimes we feel like we're on top of the world even when it comes to our relationship with God. We feel like there's certain things that we have done that make us feel good about ourselves. They make us feel like we've changed our position with God. Maybe we feel like we now can be on top of temptation. Now we're like above sin. Now we're like in this position where we don't really have to worry anymore. And there's going to be, and if you haven't experienced it already, you're going to be at a point when you feel like you're on top of the world. But I think that we need to be encouraged tonight and just reminded that the enemy wants to use your success to give you a false sense of strength. He wants to make you feel like, even though you've done something, even though you feel like you've done something great, you feel like you're on top of the world, you're not. The enemy wants you to think that you're on top of the world, but in reality, you're not. If you think about David in the Bible, he thought he was on top of the world. He was a man after God's own heart. He was the king, and all of a sudden he sees a girl that he likes, and he's just like, you know what? I'm on top of this. I got everything put together. And then he ends up killing her husband so that he could sleep with her. Then you think about Tiger Woods. He was on top of the world. He had everything going for him. He thought he was above morality. Thought he was above injury. He was invincible. But everything crumbled very quickly. So if we look at Joseph now, we understand that he's feeling good. He has to be feeling good. So now let's see how Joseph responds. Let's see how he responds to him being on top of the world. We find ourselves in verse 7. It says, after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. Yeah. So here's the first test. Here is his first test. So let's look at the facts. He's on top of the world, controls Potiphar's house. Now Potiphar's wife wants to sleep with him. Joseph's a good-looking guy. I mean, we're assuming Potiphar's wife is pretty hot. I mean, he's got probably a lot of women that he could choose from, right? In his household because he's on top. And so now there's this beautiful woman that now wants to talk to Joseph and wants to sleep with him. So let's see how he responds. It says, but he refused. Yeah. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns has entrusted to my care. No one is greater to this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Now, when I look at this, it doesn't impress me yet, okay? So even though Joseph's on top of the world, he's gone through one test, this doesn't impress me yet. Why? I think about when I try to go on a diet, okay? When I'm on a diet, the worst thing that can happen is when people confront me and ask me for foods that are not on my diet, okay? So if I go to my friend's house and they say, hey, DJ, do you want some ice cream? I like ice cream, okay? Ice cream is very good. I think it's probably good for you. It's milk, builds strong bones, something like that. Something like that, okay? Something like that. But I know very well that it's easy for me to deny the first time. Yeah. And I know, and we all know in the back of our heads, subconsciously, there's something in the back of my heads that just kind of thinks like, the person could break me down. Like the person could probably ask enough times and I'm going to probably eat. So obviously you want to stand firm. You're thinking like, I'm not going to do it. But then if the person continues to ask you, it's like, it's so difficult. I'll just have one bite, right? How many feel the struggle? I mean, can you relate with me in some ways? Like it just gets difficult when there's something you're not supposed to do, but then it continues to confront you. It continues to be right in front view where you feel like you can't avoid it anymore. And the reality is that Joseph Potiphar's wife went after him day after day. In verse 10 it says, and though she spoke to Joseph day after day, say day after day, he refused to go to bed with her, or even be with her. Now this starts to impress me a little bit. This starts to impress me a little bit because now it's not just a one-time denial. It's his wife continuing day after day asking Joseph to sleep with him, to sleep with her. And I can imagine just Joseph going to bed every night thinking about this. Because yes, I understand I might be filling in a little bit of gaps, but the Bible doesn't talk about Joseph going to bed and describing what he's thinking about at night. But I can tell you he's probably thinking about the pros and cons. He probably goes to bed thinking like, now I know I'm not supposed to do this, but man, she's really good looking, And I'm really glad that I stayed against it, but I'll try to go again, one more time, He goes to bed and he thinks about it. Well, then the next day she asks him again to sleep with him. Then he has to go to bed again. Right. He has to think about it day after day. Man, I'm taking this test. I'm taking this test, but that person's paper is right next to me. I could deny it the first time, but it's just day after day, that person's paper is just right there. Man, I want to tell the truth, and I tell the truth the first time, but man, day after day, there's just so many opportunities for me to lie. Yeah. It's just so much easier. Man, my girlfriend and I, man, we're together late at night all the time. And it's really easy that first time, but no, it's day after day. It's day after day. That tell me that you have been able to resist day after day. And now you have found yourself in places that you never thought that you would be. That you've gone places, that you've done things that if you were to look at yourself, maybe just 1 year ago, it could be 5 years ago, you look at the things that you've done and you say, how did I get there? Come on, teaching. That's so true. Very true. How did I get to that place where I'm doing these acts that I once said I would never do? Yeah. Can I tell you that's because the enemy is very smart. The enemy has been studying humanity ever since humanity existed. The enemy is not stupid. He is the father of lies. You think that you're good at lying. How about the person who is the father of lies, who created lying, right? He knows that from day one to then from zero to, hey, try this cocaine, right? He's not going to tempt you like that. He's going to tempt you little by little, day after day. He's going to break you down until now you end up and you say, why am I here? Why am I at this place where I'm doing things I never thought I would do? And I firmly believe it's because that the battle is won in the dark. I believe that the battle is won in the dark. The battle for him was really in his mind, that when he went to bed at night, he had to understand, who am I? Who am I? Am I Joseph, the person who sleeps with someone else's wife? Is that who I am? He had to think about it. In Romans, it says that we are transformed by the renewing of our mind. That for a lot of us, what can tend to happen is we let our minds wander. And I believe that everyone here, if we're starting this rebuild, if we're ready to launch into what God has for us, everyone here is going to be a part of it. And everyone here is leaders. But we need to learn how to live in the light. I can tell you, you're not going to get anywhere. You might be successful on earth, but in who you are and in your very being and the soul and what defines you, if you don't get that done first and who you know that you are, one day everything is going to crumble. It's all going to catch up to you. So what I'm asking you is, what are you doing in the dark that you would never do in the light? What are you doing now that if you were at Rendezvous, you would never think about doing, because then other people would see what I'm doing. Then believers would say, and they would start to judge me, and they would start to say, hey, oh man, I don't want to do that anymore. What are you doing that you don't want to show us? Don't worry, there's hope, okay? This is not all negative, okay? We'll bring it to a place, okay? So just stick with me. Verse 11, it says, one day he went into the house to attend to his duties. None of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Joseph knew when to fight and when to flee. Joseph knew that point where he was like, I can stand day after day, I can approach her and say no. Day after day, I can say no to this, no to this, no to this, but there's got to be some point where he's like, I cannot handle this anymore. I need to run away. I need to get away from this. And some of us need to stop playing games and just run away. That your life is at stake, that your very being and who you are is at stake. A lot of us want to keep going as far as we can until we want to ride the line of sin as far as we can. To say, hey, you know what? This is not sin. I don't think that this is sin. I don't think that this is sin. And we want to keep going as far as we can. Yeah. But that reminds me of like that. Have you ever been in those carnival games? And they have that one with the milk bottles. There's like 3 of them. And they tell you all you got to do is throw out the milk bottle. If you just hit the milk bottle, though, all of them will fall down. You'll get this big prize. Well, I actually was researching that game a little bit. I went online. I saw one article, and I was like, this is truth. But I'm just going to go with it. But the milk bottle actually has lead in the bottom. So it's really difficult. Yes, you have a small chance of getting the milk bottles down. But essentially, they're counting on the fact that you're trying to play a game that you've already lost. You're trying to play a game that you actually can't win. You know, you might have a slim chance of winning, but most people don't win. Most people can't win. So for us, we're playing a game when we say we can determine what sin is and how far we can go, that we're the ones determining, like we're playing a game with God that we've already lost. We're playing a game with God that we've already lost. And you're seeing how far you can go before it's sin when you're already deemed a sinner. Wow. You're already deemed a sinner. We're saved by grace, yes. But I'm just kind of confused. And I'm confused at myself too. I am a sinner. I sin. We all sin. But I guess my biggest question is, why do you think God would want us to get as close as we can to the thing that he saved us from? Come on. Why do we try to play games with God and we say, you know what, I want to see, hey, I can go this far with my girlfriend. I can go to these places. I can hang out with these friends. I can lie this much. But really, you're playing games, and it's just like God is trying to keep you away from that. That is not who you are. That we all have sinned. We have all fallen short of his glory. But you know what? In my head, I think that that's the beauty of it all. That's the beauty of it all. We're all sinners. Joseph was a sinner. That Joseph was a sinner, which means that we're all on the same playing field. That everyone has a chance to make a difference in the kingdom of God. Everyone has a chance to become more like Jesus. And when I think about this idea of, you're just like, how can I be this leader? How can I step into this person that God's called me to be? Because I don't feel like I can do it. I remember being at recess as a kid, and we'd always play games. We played football or basketball or soccer, whatever it is, and no one wanted to get picked last. And a lot of us, we don't want to get picked last. We want to impress our friends. We want to be like the people that we see on the TVs and who we're influenced by, and the musicians and things like that. But can I tell you that in the kingdom of God, the last will actually be first? That if you actually humble ourselves, we say, I can't do it. I don't want to impress other people, but I want to become like God. That's when you actually find yourself. This is my last point. The band can come back up, wrap up pretty quick, but my last point is this, is that your reverence for God determines your desire to please him. What does this mean? If you actually understood how God sees you, if you understood who God is, if you understood his glory in light of our imperfection and how the grace that he offers us, if you have this reverence for God, this awe for God, this fear for God, that understands that like this God that's so magnificent, that he's amazing, that he's perfect, there's no way I deserve to come in contact with him, but he came down to me. I want to be like him. That this reverence for God will then, when you have that reverence for God, when you're in that position towards God, it will then dictate that'll dictate whether you want to become like him. It says, when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of his house, she called her household servant and said, look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. So she kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story, that the Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. That's great news. I think the part where Potiphar gets it wrong, I think the point where Pharaoh gets it wrong, I think that where the jail warden gets it wrong, is they thought Joseph was a slave to them the whole time. They thought that Joseph was a slave to them. When in reality, Joseph knew the whole time that he was a first slave to the King of Kings before he was ever a slave to any king or Pharaoh. His desire to please God was greater than anything else. And it was interesting, at the beginning of the chapter, it said the Lord was pleased with Joseph at the beginning and the end. And then he found that he was successful in the eyes of the Lord, both times at the beginning and the end. Because no matter what his position was, he was successful because the Lord was with him. That when he was in a pit, he was successful. That when he was in prison, that he was successful. That when he was accused of something that he didn't do, he was successful. Because no matter what the circumstances were his eyes were on Jesus. And I think we have to keep in mind that nothing that Joseph did was his fault. We need to stop making excuses. It wasn't his fault. That he didn't make any excuse for how he was going to act and how he knew that he was going to act. And I believe as we're closing up here pretty soon, that there are a couple people in this room. The first group of people are people who feel like they've been faithfully serving God for a long time and they haven't seen the fruit of their faithfulness to God. Can I tell you that God has never promised that our lives are going to be perfect. He just promised us that he'll give us the strength to endure it. And all things work together for the good of those who love God. You know, Joseph was actually, before he became, the time when he was in prison and enslaved, it was about 15 years of Joseph doing the right thing, but not seeing the fruit. We want to see him as the right-hand man, but it took a long time before he got there. And there wasn't anything about him that necessarily sought that position. He didn't seek his position here on earth. He sought a position in the kingdom of God.
That's really good.
So if you have been faithful to God, I would just encourage you to keep going. That God is with you. That God sees you. That he has a purpose and he has a plan for your life. The fruits will come. We don't do it for the fruits. We do it because we love Jesus. There's also people in this room who have kind of just given up. That they're just like, I've tried this whole Jesus thing. I've tried to become like him. Maybe you don't even know really about Jesus, but you've been kind of doing your own thing. Like, why would I follow Jesus? I don't need to. Maybe you've been following Jesus and you're just like, I gave up because it's too hard. It's so hard to deny myself, to pick up my cross daily, deny myself and follow Jesus. That's not an easy thing to do. We have to understand who God is. We need to stop trying to look to our left and our right and compare people when Jesus already sees you as his son or daughter. I got a call a couple days ago from my friend I lived in Fresno, California. And there was this kid, I've been kind of like, he grew up in a really bad home. Both his parents did meth. They're both like missing teeth. And he lived in this, he goes from like motel to motel. They pay day to day. They've asked me for money multiple times. But this kid's in 6th grade. Now he's in 9th grade and he's been held back a time. And now he hasn't been able to go to school because his parents can't take him and help him out. And I just got a call from him a couple days ago. And this guy is the happiest kid ever. He is the happiest kid ever. I love Justin, little Justin. And both of his parents are together. They live with him. It's just obviously a different scenario. But he actually got a call, and his dad had to be admitted to the hospital because of all the drugs that he had done. His body, even though he's about 40 years old, is about like an 80-year-old's body. And all of his organs just shut down. He had to go to the hospital. So he called me a couple days ago and said, DJ, again, he was very like, hey, DJ, what's up, dude? You know, he could be going through like a fire. His house could be on fire, and he would still be like, hey, DJ, what's up, man? How you doing? And I'd be like, oh, good, Justin. What's going on? My house is on fire, you know? Happy kid. He goes, DJ, he goes, hey, man, I'm in the hospital. Keep him all bright and excited. And I go, why are you in the hospital? He goes, well, all my dad's organs shut down, and they actually had to amputate one of his hands and both of his feet. I was like, really, man, how are you doing? He goes, well, he's doing good. He's trying to keep like this positive attitude. And then we said, hey, man, well, can I pray for you? I prayed for him, hung up. 5 minutes later, he calls me. He says, hey, DJ, I just want to let you know, this is the first time, I've known him for 4 years. This is the first time this little happy-go-lucky, chubby kid, just really nice. First time he's ever like really real with me. He said, DJ, he's like, I think I'm kind of depressed. He's like, I've been having some suicidal thoughts. And here you look at a kid like Justin who's done nothing wrong, you know? But he's everything against him. I think a lot of people in this room, they feel like, why don't we just give up? Why can't I just let it go? Because I don't want to try anymore. It's so hard. All I had to do was encourage him. I said, Justin, you can't think like that, man. You can't think like that, buddy. I said, God has such a big plan for your life. I said, I know that this is hard, and I can't imagine. And I said, I wish I was there with you. But God has so many things on the other side of this hurt that you don't even see yet. That you have so many things coming for you on the other side of you obeying him. I said, he reads his Bible, he prays every morning. I said, Justin, just keep doing that, man. I said, just keep going. I know it's hard. It might come at you day after day. The thoughts might come at you night after night. I know you might get to a place where you're hurting and you're broken, and it's so easy to give up. But God's not giving up. That God's not done with you. That God sees every action that you do. That God sees that you're faithful. He sees that you're trying. He knows that you're not perfect. He knows you don't have it all together. He knows you can't do it on your own. But He's just asking for you. Can everyone stand up on their feet? Everyone stand up on their feet. I just really feel like, listen, this is you right now. But I want to give a couple calls. The first call I want to give before we close out is maybe you're experiencing, you want to experience this for the first time. You're like, hey, I just want to know who Jesus is. I want to know this guy, this God that no matter what my circumstance is, He's with me, that He'll never leave me or forsake me, that if I just obey Him and just try to follow in His ways, that His plan and purpose for my life is greater than anything I could ever ask or imagine. So maybe you right now, that's in your head. You're ready to say, I'm ready to make that commitment to Jesus. You're saying, I'm ready to commit my life to Jesus. And you say right now, there's something in your spirit that has resonated with you. There's something in your heart that you're like, you know what? I'm ready to take that next step. I'm ready to say, you know what, Jesus? I'm done trying to please people. I'm done trying to please my girlfriend. I'm done trying to please my boyfriend. I'm done trying to please my family. I'm done trying to please my boss. I'm done doing that because every time I do that, I fail. I can't do it. So right now in your head, now, typically we have people like, that you raise your hands and everything, but I believe that there's people right now that you're in your seat and you know that that's you. Yeah. You know that that's you. So in just a minute, I'm going to have you come up to this altar. And why am I going to have you come up to this altar? Is because there's something about taking a step of faith. In the same way, you're going to have to take steps to deny yourself. In the same way, you're going to have to take steps to say, you know what? I can't do that. I'm Jesus. I want to follow Jesus. That I want to know who I am. Who I am in Christ, not anyone else. And so I believe that when you take that step to come up to the altar, it's you taking a step to say, you know what? I'm done with that stuff. Joseph had to take a step. He had to flee from Potiphar's wife. He had to flee from the temptation. And from you, I want this to symbolize you leaving your past behind. You leaving what you once knew, and I want you to start coming up here. So when I count to 3, listen, we're all behind you, okay? This is a bold step of faith, I understand, but we do this every week because this is why we do everything. This is why the Rendezvous was built to begin with. This is why we've launched churches out of it. This is why it continues to grow, because there's something about the saving power of Jesus Christ that keeps people coming. So when I count to 3, again, you know it's you. You already know it's you. So when I count to 3, I want you to come up to this altar, okay? So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. I want you to walk up to the altar right now. I want you to come to this altar.